So, hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into TBD on the live stream or here on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and netnetradio.com out of Tijuana. I'm joined by my friend Maddie, and we're joined by Jonathan from his project called Glia from their home in Fairfax, Virginia. So, how have you been holding up in the quarantine, Jonathan? Like, what have you been up to? How have you adapted? How do you like virtual gigs? The world has been pretty chaotic the past couple months, especially for those living in the US.
Yeah, I think it's been an adjustment like for anybody else, but yeah, I would say the biggest change is just like nobody could have ever predicted this would happen.
Yeah.
And even though I have a pretty close-knit family, everybody's within like a couple miles driving distance, but it's like with the lockdown and the quarantine, you still kind of feel isolated. You're trying to be cautious. So
yeah,
I think that's been the biggest adjustment, is just only being with myself, my family.
Yeah.
And the past year has been kind of wild because me and my wife had our first kid. So
congratulations.
Thank you. And sometimes now I kind of struggle to figure out what in this weird situation is due to being a first-time parent and what is like this catastrophic quarantine, pandemic, lockdown.
Yeah.
All in all, we've been doing well though, so no complaints here.
That's cool, dude. I'm glad that you came out like relatively unscathed, I guess,
Exactly.
for the most part.
Exactly. You know what's actually wild too is you asked about gigs. I might be in the unusual position that I wasn't really performing before the pandemic. So that's been a whole nother weirdness of like starting to step into making music more when there's like no way to do a live show.
Yeah, exactly. That's really interesting, actually. So you're kind of dipping your feet in when it's been totally virtual. So
Yep.
was there a reason that you never performed live, like pre-pandemic, pre-COVID?
I think it was just like normal artistic insecurity, and I'm a hermit, kind of. Like, I like being around people, but I don't know. I think I always talked myself out of it, or thought there's other people better, or there's someone else who would be like more interesting to perform.
Yeah.
And just got my arm twisted by, I don't know if you know Andrew Scheich out of Chicago area. He's
okay.
He was running a performance space out there called an open space, and just because of where we both lived, he liked my music, but I had never gotten a chance to go out to Chicago and perform there.
Yeah.
But when it got to be virtual, he was like, "You have to."
Yeah.
Like, you have to just.
You have to do it. You have no excuse anymore.
Exactly. So that's kind of what got the ball rolling.
That's cool. So, do you expect yourself to perform like in person when it's a thing again?
Most likely, yeah. I probably still won't perform as much as other people, but there's a decent spot out in this area called Rhizome that used to be like right on the outskirts of DC.
We had Luke Stewart on the show, if you're familiar.
Okay.
And Luke
So
Stewart was talking about Rhizome, yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. It's an awesome space that I don't think there really was anything like that even when I was younger.
Yeah.
That's just it's like a hub for the community for experimental, almost anything. They'll do like film events, DIY workshops for building things, and then performances with all types of music. So it's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yep. Cool.
Well, hopefully, if you get, I guess, into the mood for touring, we can see you out in California. But if not, maybe one of these days we'll make it out to the East Coast and we could see you perform at Rhizome or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that was kind of just like something I was just curious about, because just by looking at your discography, you've like created a pretty accomplished catalog of work with like, labels all over the place, such as Finery, Leaving, Dasa from Greece. But you also have like a ton of stuff under just like, self-released.
Exploding.
Yeah. And, your earliest record even came out, what I think I saw on your Bandcamp, it was called like Smithereens, and that was from like 2010. And it's like really interesting to hear that, you just haven't really performed, but you've been at it for so long. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually, no. Go ahead. I kind of want to hear the thought or question. That's a good point, though.
Yeah. So it was just like interesting to me to hear you say like, yeah, I haven't really been performing stuff, and I'm like, oh, you'd think that someone would bug you if you've been at it since 2010 to play a show with them or something, especially with so many people hitting you up for tapes from like literally like all over the world. It seems like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's kind of the positive and negative of being in Virginia. It's pretty close to. So what's weird about even the part of Virginia I'm in? I don't know how familiar you are with the state, but like Richmond, which is a few hours south,
Yeah.
has an incredible scene, especially for instrumental music, for beats, for like, I don't know why there's this gap between like Richmond
Mm-hmm.
and Baltimore, where even DC doesn't have as much going on as those two spots to me. But yeah, I think it was just a matter of I was too lazy to drive up to New York to force my way into like I had some friends in that area
Yeah.
who put on events, and that was kind of like even a big part of my development as an artist was some time I spent around Hudson, New York. That scene is like there's a folk and like chamber classical scene.
Oh, with Spookfish.
Spookfish doesn't ring a bell, but there's literally tons of artists and performance spaces there.
Yeah.
Like, for some reason, just a couple hours outside New York City itself, further up the Hudson River. Then it's beautiful. Like I think a lot of it has to do with the college out near New Paltz and some other spots. But yeah, I think it was just a matter of it didn't seem as weird to me because so many of the artists I grew up loving were kind of overlooked.
Yeah.
So I think when I started making music, and this isn't any kind of like judgment on people who have higher aspirations, but I just never thought it would turn into anything. I figured there's so many people over decades or just around the world, because I'm really into music from other countries too, who they put in the work, they made beautiful stuff, or they made stuff that was really personal and compelling. And just because of circumstances, then they kind of had to wait for their opportunity.
Yeah.
If that opportunity ever came.
I feel like I still see this attitude that you have, like, even when you like post stuff like nowadays. Like, I think you posted something about your record and it was like weeks later or something after it came out. And this was in like December, I think. And you're just like, yeah, I didn't want to like flood it. There's like so many other artists putting stuff out in December, but here's my record if you want to check it out. I feel like I feel like that attitude is like still reflected, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. It is what it is. Actually, another part of the equation might also just be I'm the youngest of 4 kids.
Yeah.
And it's really tough to impress my family. So, especially like music, like
when you're making some bleeps and bloops that the average person probably can't get into, you know what I'm saying?
They don't really get it, maybe still.
Yeah.
So maybe that kind of always made me think of myself as like, it is what it is.
Yeah. I feel you on the parents not really understanding the music though. I'm also really into like emo music and stuff like that. And I was like telling my dad that I just had hit up this artist called Basura Asiala from Colombia. They're this screamo artist. My dad's like, screamo? And I'm just like,
what
yeah,
is that?
Yeah. I'm like, I'm just not gonna get into it. They're a cool band.
They're international.
Yeah, they're from Colombia.
Not to explain.
Exactly. I was like, yeah, they're just this really cool band. Like, but anyway, so I was gonna ask you too, like, what were your beginnings as a musician, and like, what were some like formative like computer music moments and inspirations? Like, how did you get started? You said that you were into like, I guess this like chamber, like indie rock movement in like New York and stuff. So
yeah. So that kind of happened pretty interestingly. Well, I guess first the roots of how I kind of got into making music. As I mentioned, my family likes music, but especially my parents are more into like anything you could dance to. They're from West African country, Nigeria.
That's cool.
And there's a huge, beautiful music tradition from there of variety of styles, both in the past and now.
Uh-huh.
But I kind of grew up with the older Nigerian music as one foundation. And then both my parents kind of have a common interest in 70s folk and like some of the rock that came out back then.
Yeah.
And reggae music. So I had that as a kind of another foundation. And my mom really likes like vocal jazz, some of the older artists from the 20th century, all the famous names you could think of, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole. So I kind of had that also on the back burner. Then growing up in the 90s, my siblings were into everything. So from alternative rock, hip hop, R&B, anything like that kind of caught our attention. And I started learning drums. So that was the first like thing that got me into music. Was I wanted to like be the drummer for Weezer or something.
Yeah.
We all do. We all do. It's really.
So that was kind of the beginnings, and like simultaneously as I was learning drums, I decided I wanted to like get into making beats, making hip hop. I saw music videos and I was like, okay, I keep seeing like MPCs or different stuff like that. Thought I might try and get one, and I looked online to try and figure out how much it costs, and I was like, okay, this isn't happening.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I got to figure out another way. And maybe that was really what led me into computer music, is reading online, finding out people could make beats with just a DAW on your computer.
Yeah.
And so I just started tinkering, and it was just little by little making crappy stuff, putting it online, having people critique it, and then starting to figure out myself by comparing what I was able to make and like my favorite songs at the time or favorite producers. So it was kind of, a long winding road. I guess what led me most directly was one of my favorite artists in that New York scene that I was talking about. He played 12-string guitar.
Okay.
But he also made laptop music, like ambient music. And I had never really I heard a lot of experimental music in the 60s and 70s, whether it was Terry Riley or artists like that who made stuff with analog synthesizers. And I was into Eliane Radigue, Delia Derbyshire, a lot of the BBC radiophonic artists.
Oh,
but
that's great stuff.
Yes. And like I just didn't think of trying to do some of the same sounds digitally until I met him. So that was cool. And maybe around the same time, I've always been into video games too. So that's a whole other side of like how I got into computer music.
Yeah.
Ones in particular, any soundtracks that stand out?
To like video game soundtracks?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Nintendo and Zelda and like Sega. So Zelda games, all of the I want to say like all of the Metroid games.
Oh, those are wonderful.
Classics.
Yeah, and we would also play a lot of like fighting games. So for whatever reason, any fighting game you can think of on a Sega or Nintendo system in the 90s.
Stuff like Power Stone and...
Okay, exactly. Like
Virtua Fighter, oh my god.
And like Dreamcast too had a huge impact because like Trick Style, I don't know if you ever heard that. It was like this, it was like a futuristic like hoverboarding game.
The Dreamcast game that sticks out to me with the best or most noteworthy soundtrack is Jet Set Radio.
I was waiting if you would say that. Yeah, that definitely tipped the scale. That probably was the first time I was willing to admit that I liked electronic music. Like up until that point, it always seemed like a gimmick in my head because I grew up hearing it, but it was always like it reminded me more of the past than the future, or reminded me of like the 80s more than anything. And like I love that soundtrack. It had such a wide variety that, I think Jet Set Radio was a kind of a turning point to shift out of just drumming
Yeah.
and like hip hop. So
it's funny again that you mentioned that, because I've got a song from Cibo Monto on my show. Yeah. They had Birthday Cake, and I never connected the dots between that song and Viva La Woman, which I've been listening to, and I'm like, this is really one of the best things I've heard in ages. And then I've also got a Bomberman 64 track on my show today, because it's really solid drum and bass. And there are wonderful YouTube comments of people being like, my mom made me just play this game because she wanted to hear the music.
Exactly. Bomberman, there's like this Space Monkey game I feel like I remember.
Oh, yeah, Space Monkey Ball.
There's like too many, but all of those kind of just like made me also really fascinated with like DJ culture and remixing, because I did like reggae, but then again I hadn't heard as much newer stuff that was happening until then. And kind of the way that it really connects to what I'm doing now is that the DS came out and there were a bunch of music games on DS.
Oh yeah.
And like rhythm games too.
Yeah.
And then Electroplankton had a crazy cool like digital synthesizer soundtrack that you could manipulate and play. And I remember looking up stuff about that, and I found the Tenorion, which was made by one of the developers. It was like a glowing toy cube / instrument synthesizer. If you've never seen it, I'll send you a link like afterward. It's crazy.
Yeah, dude, I'd be down to see that. That sounds sick.
I was just curious about it, kept reading about it, and everywhere that I saw one of those, I saw comparisons to the Monome, which had just come out.
Oh, really?
Probably around like 2006, 2007.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that really was what blew the doors off for me. I had never heard of Max, MSP. I had never thought of open source, like using code to make sound like that. All of the people in that who make those and use those, from Daedalus, like probably the most famous example, to a lot of other independent artists around the world, that kind of really got me into using a computer instead of using something else.
Yeah. So in the Cached Media Discord, I've seen that you guys talk, or there's like a gear channel or whatever on there, and I see you guys. I have no idea what you guys are talking about, by the way. It's like way past me, and it's interesting because my friend Alex, Alex Meinhof, he's from KCSB. We know him from Santa Barbara.
That name? Okay, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, he chats in there, and he's from KCSB too. So it's really interesting to just see. Like, I joined, and I'm like, oh, dude, Alex, what up, dude? And he's always like doing DIY music. He makes really cool stuff. We've had him play a couple shows with his project, 20.83 microseconds. But
field recording pop music.
Yeah,
is always what I found it to be.
Yeah,
nice.
But I was gonna ask too, because it seemed like you guys were talking about like making instruments. Do you like make instruments as well?
The long story short is no. But that's like even more embarrassing than the whole fact that I wasn't performing, because there's no reason that I shouldn't have made my own instruments. But okay, so I'm going to talk about this because this is actually a really cool topic. Part of my interest in using the computer still, even though my default, or where I feel most comfortable, because what I kind of started out on was drums, then using a turntable and mixer, like kind of the scratch music scene in the Bay Area and in LA in the early 2000s really inspired me, and Chicago. Chicago had some of the best producers, but that's another tangent. But like those, I started with literally just one turntable, one mixer, and a loop pedal. So like using a delay, using a sampler to make and modify loops is kind of how I approach anything else, whether it's just a computer program or any other new instrument. And so I've always kind of felt most comfortable misusing other people's instruments that were already there, misusing tools, misappropriation.
Yeah. And
so the challenge then is I got excited when I saw people using code to make their own instruments.
Yeah.
But my mind doesn't work that way. Like it's easy enough, it's doable, whether it's Max, any other free program, Pure Data, stuff like that. There's a million different things you could try and use that are free.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. There's just kind of a hurdle mentally for me. Like I come up with ideas, but then to go from idea to execution, I usually talk myself out of it and start making music again instead of working on an instrument.
Yeah. So this is really interesting to me because I just don't really know much about this. So when you say make an instrument, do you mean make like a physical thing? Because I saw you guys talking about soldering, or is making an instrument literally like coding? Like,
well, that's also a great question. Well, it could really be either, because I think it's easier than ever now to, if you want to make a physical instrument, to actually, like, there's websites where you could design the circuitry. You can
really
get it printed out for cheap, buy the parts separately, and then solder it together yourself, put it together yourself.
It reminds me of a project.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
There's a guy named Bad Jazzer, that's the name of the band, and they've done some stuff on Timble tapes and a couple other labels, and it's, I think, 2 people, and they're making their own instruments and then making jazz music with that. And
that doesn't surprise me. Yeah. It's amazing. But like, I'd say the 2 things that kind of opened my eyes to that, if you're gonna make a physical instrument, were there was I feel like he's a New York area artist, Tristan Parrish. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. He did this like 1-bit symphony project like 10, 15 years ago, where he literally composed a full scale, like 45-minute piece, and then programmed one circuit to play that piece as like a digital piece of art, like a physical piece of art. You could buy it, and you turned it on, and you weren't playing like a physical recording. You were playing the composition from his circuitry or whatever, which is just wild. And at the time, I had never seen anything like that. But I would say the other person kind of stands out, just was on the tip of my tongue, and now I'm forgetting. But like, there's plenty of people now who actually now I remember. Young Marble Giants. Have you ever heard of this group?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to go run and get my reissue of them.
Okay, so like, if you read the liner notes for their album, at the time, like, I'm reading the liner notes, and it was like they basically made a small analog synth for the drums on that whole album.
Oh,
and
wow, that's
like,
insane.
What? Like, who makes their own synth?
It's one of my favorite post-punk albums because it's a very, like, this is indie pop, anyone could do this, and it has this very strange, like, I'm in a box sound.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, also, there's other things, this is me being a nerd, I think they use like a baritone guitar through most of it, but like, the melodies and the drums was a homemade synth. So again, yeah, that's just like one side of things. But yeah, the other side of it is now with people have made it really easy with Raspberry Pi, Teensy. There's a lot of like chip microcomputer things that are super cheap. Like, you could buy one of those for $20 or $30, I think.
No, totally, yeah.
And then you kind of just piece together the accessories you might want, and you can program any kind of code you want on there, and they're like fully capable little small computers. So it's like the same way you can make music with a laptop. If you put in the effort with one of those, you can kind of have your own instrument. And to cut to the real chase, several companies have or artists have made like little kits, or made even a code base that makes doing something like that easier. So you've probably heard people chatting about Organelle, Critter and Guitari Organelle.
Yeah.
Monome Norns. Those are all just like little ways to make the audio side of the code easier for people who aren't super nerds.
Oh, really? So like like the monome norms, so are you still like kind of coding, but they just make it like simpler, I guess is what you're trying to say? So you still have to like
they
write
do
code.
a lot of the like behind the scenes math for the things that you would want in a synthesis, in a either a synth or a sampler. So that's basically it. this makes it a little bit easier. So it's still not, maybe someone off the street who's never tried it would still maybe be a little intimidated by it, but there's like tutorials and stuff like that if you want to learn. So
Yeah. That's sick. So, what's the concept behind your Concentric series? You had, since we're like on the topic, I guess, of like, writing programs and like instruments and stuff, you had Dan Dirks write your liner notes on Concentric 6. I don't really know who that is, but just like looking into it, I saw that he wrote like a program that I've seen other people mention in their music.
Yeah.
Or like, what, I forget what he called it. I'd have to look at it.
I think it's cheat codes.
Yeah,
He's done
cheat codes.
Cheat codes is his most famous and like the most fleshed out instrument. Dan it's impossible to speak in maybe a couple sentences about Dan. He's super cool. Been like a huge resource and super open and friendly for years now in just talking about music, coming up with ideas. Sometimes I've beta tested music that apps that he's written. And yeah, I'm gonna sell him short, but like he's the most super friendly, open guy about just sharing information about making music, especially with stuff like this. So what ended up happening with those liner notes and then the whole Concentric project, Concentric kind of for me was a way to let go of overthinking music.
Yeah.
And I guess also when I first started talking about it, so this is like, I guess maybe end of 2019, I started sharing the concept behind it before I even shared some of the recordings. And it was something of interest to me for years, where whether it was in poetry that I wrote or music that I made, I kind of had some of the same principles of what's the least amount of input I can give to make something that I enjoy. And it kind of related to relinquishing agency and the idea that I'm in full control of the music making process or the art making process, and was more about like the idea of maybe you throw a pebble into a lake and you just watch the ripples. You watch the concentric circles kind of expand away from your source of input. And it also kind of was a way to organize my aesthetic ideas. And so I prefer electronic music that's less focused on complexity and melody and more focused on complexity and rhythm and texture and timbre. So it gave me also a chance to kind of, I guess, shift the listener's focus toward what I wanted them to hear in a track. And so I felt like the only way to really explain it was not just to talk about it, but to make examples, and that I would learn as much about it as listeners would. So I just started making a bunch of tracks, and eventually I released a few collections, and like people started getting more interested in it. Dan was one of them.
Yeah.
So by the time I did that volume, the 6th one, then I felt like it would be appropriate for him to
read the
to do the liners.
Yeah,
because he had a perspective of having seen my past work in comparison to that as well.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So another thing that I've noticed about your music. So you've released a couple sample packs for other people to use in their music.
Yeah.
Your most recent being, Follow Deck. I've had another musician named Miral. Her name is Miral. She's just released her most recent
music.
Yeah, she's really cool on the show. And a big thing that we talked about when I interviewed her is like her approach to sampling as an instrument, specifically. So what's your take? Like, what's your take on sampling as an instrument, and how do you incorporate sampling into your music, and how do you approach it?
That's a really good question. I think I would agree with Miral. And yeah, so for me, sampling is like the basis of everything that I do. Even something that sounds like a polished song, or polished as my music gets. it's probably been through so many phases. In that sense, I kind of think of sampling more like printmaking than most other people do. Printmaking is something I'm kind of interested in as well. Just like any kind of the way that an image could be transferred and modified with print is really unique. And I feel like something I also have learned from Moral is fidelity, or the ideas that we often have about fidelity and quality of music nowadays, now that it's really possible to get things super pristine. I feel like maybe too many people are shooting for the same thing. And this isn't saying go to the other extreme where then now there's this huge, like, everything is lo-fi.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Oh boy.
Like, but like, I feel like there's so much space in between both of those extremes to really make that's one way to make music personal. So that's kind of how I view sampling. So whether it's my way of warping someone else's music or my way of taking an old recording of myself and developing it in a way that I wouldn't have been able to play physically, that's kind of how I look at it. And so like the sample packs I've done, I got to give a shout out to Roger Habon, 10-4 Raj, and Dan, and some of the other people who kind of asked me for a sample pack, because I would have never made one myself, because I feel like the way I sample is very like unorthodox and undesirable. So like I never organize my samples. I never have my samples organized by BPM, by tuning, by the duration. I never know how long a sample is. I'm not trying to have it loopable on like a perfect set of number of bars. I kind of just it's a free for all. If I take something, I use it. If I don't use it in a finished track that day and I messed with it, I'll save it, and then I might use it later. But I don't like organize it. I probably have like 7 versions of the same sample because it's stuff I worked on different days and left it cast aside or saved it at a different tempo. And yeah, so it's basically like those sample packs. The only way I could make myself make one was I decided, okay, if people want it, I'm going to do it my way. And I'm going to let them know in advance, this is not your normal sample pack.
Yeah.
So I expect you to do what I do with it. So I kind of gave them random names and was just like, if you download it, rename it, or listen to it. If there's any you don't like, toss them.
Yeah.
Keep the ones you want, rename them whatever you want, and organize it how you choose to. So
yeah.
The release is also one of the few. A lot of your releases have some rights reserved, copyright protections. Really unique stuff there. Again, just like Creative Commons. And I know you had talked a bit about remix culture earlier here. And again, I think kind of seeing the legacy of that, or seeing that in your Bandcamp, is a really fascinating continuation.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Let me just say this. I don't think if there really was a way, and maybe this is an ideal that other people have expressed, but like, I would not have any rights associated to my music. I don't want any music, whether I let it be known, if you hear this, any music I've ever made, feel free to sample it. I'm never going to come after you. It's all royalty free. Yeah. I just can't always label it that way on Bandcamp or anywhere else I might showcase it, because I don't think anyone owns sound. And yes, of course, I'm going to abide by laws. But hey, for my music, I'm not interested in that. It's vibration. Like, how could someone say that they're going to police what someone else does with it? If you want to make a crappy song with something you sample from me, do it.
Yeah.
But what's more likely is you're going to make something better than me. So I feel like when there's no limits on sound like that and people do feel free, the results end up being so transformative.
Yeah.
It is a way of like community building, because when people have told me they've remixed something I made or used, now like just in the few months that I've shared these sample packs, a few people have shown what they've done with them, and it's like, I would have never done that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
I might actually take some. I'm working on a terrible field recording. I'm like, let's see. This would be fun.
You should. You should. It's interesting that you mentioned 10.4 Raj, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they just released a record, and Mark Mercer I think played on it as well. Mark Mercer did some guitar work on it.
Yeah, the what is that?
we love Mark.
Yeah.
Why am I forgetting all the
Figmore, I think it is, and Juicebox. Yeah.
His new duo on Press Selects.
Yeah, that was literally like the chillest record I've heard in a while. Just like some, I don't even, some R&B soul type stuff. It's just, yeah, it's honestly really sick, Maddie. You should listen to it. So were your samples used in that record at all?
No. If they were, he would have told me, I think. But yeah, no, not on that one. I think they had that finished before I even started my sample.
Yeah.
Files. But Raj is really cool. And speaking of remixes, that also actually is kind of how I fell backwards into computer music, was wanting to remix stuff. And relating to him, he gave me permission to remix a track off of his album before this Figmore one.
Yeah.
Which was, why am I forgetting that? It's starts with the T. He's gonna laugh about this later, but like I heard the album and kind of reached out to him, and I was just like, look, if there's any of these I can remix, let me know. I would be more than happy to. And he kind of was curious what I would do with one track, and so that's on he, after he heard it, he let me release the remix as a single, which was also super gracious and generous of him. Really appreciated that. It was a fun project, fun thing to tackle.
That's sick. So another thing I was gonna ask you kind of already like mentioned this before, but like, what's the coolest thing you've seen come to fruition from your samples? Your sample packs.
I would have to say, and this is where I'm like forgetting every artist's name. Logan Kane, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Super like awesome at everything, but especially I think guitar. He took the samples to a place I literally could not even have foreseen or imagined. Like, made this high tempo rhythm and then was playing over top of it. That's probably the best I've heard with it.
So do you ever like not know some of the people like personally that just use your samples and then send them to you, and you're just like, wow, this is insane. Like
sometimes it's just you'll get tagged in a post or something, or people have emailed me. So it's really interesting.
That's really cool. So I guess knowing that you incorporate samples into your own music, like you're saying, and that you don't really care about royalties or anything, is this sort of a way to give back to the community or like sample decks?
Yeah. Well, let me make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. So you mean like if I were to sample someone else, or like you mean my packs?
I mean, just because like you sample other people's stuff, is this kind of like your way of like, okay, I use samples. Here's some samples that anybody else can use. Kind of just like keeping the circle going, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So let me say this. It's actually something I wouldn't have expected. Good question. I wouldn't have expected to talk about this. So here's the thing. Basically, I talk out of two corners of my mouth because I believe that sound should be freely accessible, but I'm also painfully aware of the reality of I'm poor. Not poor, but like I'm not trying to pay like $1 million lawsuit over sample infringement or something.
Yeah.
So I pretty much don't really sample other people.
Oh, really?
I do it, but it like now for the first time, I cleared one sample. It's a smaller but less famous artist. I just reached out to them directly and made sure they were cool with me using it and asked what they thought would be fair for using it in one song. And they were like, if you use it in one song, this. If you use it in two songs, this. Whatever. But aside from that, I mean, in a way, maybe that's why I have that kind of viewpoint about my own music. I mean, I genuinely do believe I don't care if someone uses it, but maybe it's also to absolve some level of guilt, because I'll sample stuff from YouTube, or I'll sample stuff from Instagram or something. Like if I find this but it would have to be, I kind of have these weird sense of honor or rules where I feel like if if I'm able to reach out to someone, there's no reason for me not to contact them. But like, if for whatever reason, because the artist has passed away or something else like that, that I feel those rules don't apply. I don't know. I think it depends on what I hear. I'll tell you the honest truth about sampling, though, is the way other people sample also is they hear a song they like and they want to almost loop something from that and then build around that. I almost feel like I can't make a good song if the song is good.
Yeah.
Like, if I like the sound, I feel like they did it well enough that I'm going to leave it alone. I want to listen to it.
That's all you can do with it, yeah.
Yeah, like, but if there's something that's kind of a little cheesy or a little off, then it's like, I could twist this into something funky. I don't know.
Yeah, something different.
It's kind of how I look at it.
This is really fascinating to me, just because also, like, the logistics of doing this, you're doing this all on these computer programs, and they're open source. They're all being built by different people with, I think, different, skill sets or goals, but the end result is going through a computer program.
Yep.
Still, I remember with Marcus Pop stuff with Oval, he always kind of emphasized the fact that he's like, well, yeah, we're taking apart these CDs, we have these samples, but I'm just dragging and dropping files. I'm not really making music. I'm just, taking all the samples I've got and assembling them into something.
Yep.
And I think he was, again, astutely aware of the fact that, like, all of the music we're going to be making or in this kind of, century, if you're doing it digitally by those computers, they have that final say. And so not only do you maybe have those biases, or you have these, different limiting factors.
Yeah. No, I think maybe this is really actually a great question, which hopefully, I don't know if you're expecting me to take this long on it, but like maybe what's also influenced my viewpoint about sampling is that I started with drums. Because I'll tell you the truth, when I started drumming, being a young person and hearing cool drummers, you think, like, okay, one of my favorite drummers was just passed away, Tony Allen, played with Fela, and basically invented a genre. He invented Afrobeat.
Oh, wow.
By the way that he played the drums. He mixed together high life music from Nigeria, jazz, funk, like James Brown style funk. And he literally came up with a new type of drum beat. So when I really love Neil Peart with with Rush. Like, these are people who you felt like could create a beat or create something that had never been heard before. And I think at that point in trying to learn to play music, I really felt like that was a goal. Like, the level of excellence or mastery would be to create a rhythm. And the more I learned about rhythm, the more I heard rhythms from around the world, the more I heard electronic music and sequences, I think I felt like that's not really possible. So that wasn't the goal anymore. It wasn't to create something that had never been heard. It was just to create something personal, to create something honest. And maybe the only way to kind of back my way into what my original goal was to combine elements, even with effects or with delays or with samplers in some way that wouldn't be the same as someone else. No one else would make the same choices as me. So, but yeah, I think maybe once I felt like rhythms are universal and don't belong to anyone, and so anyone can reuse them and use them again, that same thinking kind of transferred into how I approach sampling.
That's cool. So, I guess another thing I was going to ask is, like, you said that you're really into, like, printmaking and stuff. And I've noticed that, like, you always have, like, a different artist make stuff for your releases. And you had also mentioned one artist, I can't think of their name off the top of my head, but they introduced you to, like, zines and stuff like that.
Yes, I'll talk about it's Nick Vinalia. Vinalia? He's now New York based, used to be in New Mexico. And so this is kind of coming full circle. Back in the day when I was more into scratch music, coincidentally enough, he was a fan of some of the same bands.
Yeah.
So I would like early YouTube comments and stuff in other discussion rooms and stuff on that style is how I first came across him. And I was also really into graffiti back in the day, and especially the style that came out of San Francisco.
Did you paint graffiti by chance, or?
No, another side of the being a hermit, a little too timid to do some of the risky things I'm interested in.
I have some friends that are really into tagging and stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah, they've gotten locked up a few times. Yeah, it's wild. I honestly don't know if I recommend the lifestyle just that they're living, but
I can say the graffiti to printmaking pipeline is real. That happened to my brother in Richmond, Virginia.
Yes.
He got a Rhizograph printer. He's doing stuff. He did something for Feel It Out Records, the punk label down there in Richmond.
Oh wow, that's sick.
Hey, so Rhizome, we're gonna get back to Rhizome. So here's what happened to me. I actually tried making my own ink.
Oh wow!
I just thought it was cool. Like, you could make ink at home. Again, that was one of those like light bulb moments as a teenager, and seeing that and understanding the skill. And then, wait, what were we talking about? Nick. Okay, yeah. So, so basically, I had this interest in a lot of the styles coming out of the Bay Area and in graffiti, and a lot of the same people who were in the graffiti world in out west were also starting to like set up their own galleries basically, and like make prints, make zines. They were doing posters for shows for bands. So he kind of got me interested in a certain shop run by Kelly Lynn Jones at the time. It was Little Paper Planes, and that's a whole history that you could probably look up. She's since closed the shop, but it just kind of opened my eyes to, like, the validation or the validity of DIY art, which wasn't the same where I lived geographically. So like he really helped me out at just understanding stuff. Not even understanding stuff. He wouldn't even think of it that way. It was just exchanging ideas, telling me about bands he liked, telling me about artists he liked, and showing. I bought a few zines from him too that he had made. He's a really good photographer as well. So yeah, that kind of just made me think more about that. And then later on, I had my own separate interest in different types of printmaking, and eventually got a Rhizome. That is the most wild piece of like nerdy gear I've ever owned. But it was just too big and cumbersome when I was moving. I had to get rid of it. So
that's a bummer.
Yeah, but I and as far as the artists you asked about, Nick did one of my recent art covers for ZVK, the tape I did, and that's kind of an extension or outgrowth from the Concentric's project, because I always kind of felt like I wanted to do my own art.
Yeah,
I always did my own covers, and it wasn't until I did the tape for Finery, and then once I started doing the Concentric's covers, I saw the impact that that opening myself up had on my own work. And that was just from me making the covers, making the music, and talking about the process, that I decided to open it up even more. And from the fifth one, Andrew Scheich did the cover for the fifth Concentric's project. Then I was just like, I want to have a different artist do it every time. So
yeah, I was gonna ask. So do you have a different artist doing it every time? I also noticed that you had I'm probably gonna say their name wrong, Olivier Cruer or something.
I would probably say his name wrong too.
Yeah,
but you did excellently well.
Yeah, talking about our friend Alex Meinhof from Discord again, he actually recommended me Olivier's music, and yeah, I had played it on the show before. So when I saw that, like, you had
super underrated.
Yeah, 100%.
His music is incredible. Yeah,
very much so. And like when I noticed that you had hit him up for like a visual piece of art, or like a physical piece of art for like your tape or whatever, or your album, yeah, I just think the connections are crazy. I was just like, wow, dude, I feel like there's so much connections going on with Glia and all these other artists that are just, I guess,
bubbling on the surface.
Yeah,
like
you know what I'm saying?
it really kind of goes deeper than that too, and I won't take long. But Olivier makes one of the apps that I use. He makes one of my favorite loopers. It's called Compass,
Okay.
and it's basically just stereo 60-second looper that you have control over the direction, pitch, rate, and all this other stuff. So I had already been using it on some of the other previous Concentric projects, so it made perfect sense for me to, when I saw his album covers, I was like, can you make me one? And
Yeah.
he obliged.
That's so sick. So I guess, how do you decide on who to make your artwork? Like, you choose a different, piece of art for every, or a different artist for every release. Do you like choose someone who you feel like goes well with the work you're putting out, or is it just like, oh, I've been into this person's work recently?
Oh, it depends. I think I kind of really I like improvisation, so it just depends how I'm feeling. But like, and I've actually tried both ways. I've tried having them listen to an early version or a couple of the songs and make something, which is what happened. I did a album, I guess it was by now December or November, with Matt Looks in Michigan, and he's a wood carver painter.
Oh wow!
And I sent him 2 tracks. We intended it to be an AV collab, so I sent him 2 tracks. He started working on the art. He made a track with me, and then after I saw the finished artwork, I made 1 or 2 more songs, and then we decided on what would be the final release. But there's been some where I knew in advance I wanted a specific artist to work with me on the project, and if they were available, or if we could agree on something, then it worked out. And sometimes it was I think it just depends. But reaching out directly to artists is always, for me, the best way to, and it's usually just from a conversation about their work. Like, I'm really just genuinely impressed or intrigued by how they made something, or how they arrange things, or what tools they use, and then we end up working together sometimes.
That's cool. So I guess that's going to be another thing that I was leading into already. I guess we're going to kind of switch into more of your very recent work, and specific, I guess.
Cool.
You released 20 records, it seems, in 2020. I just think that's crazy, dude. That's
I roll her.
Yeah, that's literally the definition of prolific. You know what I'm saying? And there's 3 within a couple months, dude. There's people that put music out every 5 or 6 years or something. You know, I guess just because we were already talking about collaborating, your tape with Matthew David from December. What can you tell me about that? And you collaborate with multiple other people. Another release that I really liked of yours that I found recently was a jazz record from a jazz label, and it was your take on jazz. I guess, what is your approach to collaborating, and I guess just tell me about that, and your record with Matthew David.
I would love to. Thank you. That's a really good question as well. Okay, so the way I look at releasing music, so I've already kind of touched on the fact that I'm an album-centric artist. So the way that I kind of looked at music, first of all, as far as labels or collaborating, is I'm thinking of it however this works out in my mind, preparing for a gallery show. So there's the way I make music. Someone was just actually talking to me about this, because I think it's a challenge a lot of independent artists face, where they're they want to release music with a label. They're trying to figure out how to get the label's attention, and should they have all the tracks done? Should they be demos? Are they going to have to revise stuff or compose new things after they initiate a relationship with the label? I've been really fortunate. Not everything I've wanted has worked out. There's still labels I would love to work with. It just never has happened. But I kind of have been embracing. I've been really fortunate to kind of start out with the first label I kind of worked with was Finery, because it was through Carl Fusek, an Canada-based artist. I think he's in Vancouver now. I heard his album. It was a newer label at the time, back in 2014, and I was just hey, how did you get on this label? next thing you know, I'm talking with the label head in Denmark, and essentially, I like starting from scratch. I like the label to say, "We're ready to work with you. This is our expectations on each side, what I'm expecting out of it, what they're expecting out of it." And then I start composing, like as if I got hired to do a show at a like site specific work, basically. And so then the music, sometimes I have an idea already what I'm going to do, or I have themes in mind that I would like to explore. And usually that's what I might propose to a label or to another artist if we're collaborating. So specifically, what ended up happening with the Matthew David collab was I've just been a fan of the label forever. Like from day one, I'm a huge fan of Dub Lab Radio out west.
Hey, you can't see it, but I'm wearing a Dub Lab shirt underneath my sweater.
That's it. Future Roots.
Future Roots Radio.
So, like, I remember when he was helping with, like, the Sprout sessions at Dub Lab, and then I think maybe it was them that posted about him starting a label, or maybe it was on Alpha Pup, which is a digital distributor, huge, massive distributor out there.
Wow.
And so I've just been a fan of the label forever. We've chatted in the past via email, but like I never would have thought I would be collaborating with him. And long story short, after the Open Space virtual show I did last year, then they started doing the listen to music next to a plant at home instead of the ones in the park at Tierra de la
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they started doing these virtual shows and casting a wider net as far as the artists, that could perform. And somehow Matthew reached out to me and was like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing one of these?" So yeah, of course, heck yeah. So I played, and it was a weird improv set, and I was like panicking, like, man, I just blew my one opportunity to impress these people. But people liked it.
Yeah.
Some people liked it. And afterward, I had put out my own DIY tape last March, I think, last February or March. And like I was just I'm lazy. I don't really like shipping myself. So I did a small batch, and then I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
People can get the Bandcamp version. But like Matthew and I think somebody behind the space or the shop in New York, Commend, which I guess is an extension of Revenge International.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
So like
so many sub-labels and stuff going on there.
This is the kind of weird stuff, like, how could I have imagined that would be happening about my work? Like, they're talking about my tape. Like, somebody needs to put this out. Like, a label needs to put this out.
Wow.
And I was like,
that's crazy.
Does somebody want to put this out? Sure. Like,
you're like, I'm down,
want
dude.
To fight over this, please tell me. So, next thing you know, Matthew kind of DM'd me, and we started talking. And the basic idea was, he offered me the opportunity, maybe I shouldn't be discussing this, but heck, why not? He offered me the opportunity to reissue that, and he's like, would you be cool with that? And I was like, to be honest, no. Like, I want to make a new tape for you. So we started talking, and next thing you know, we started exchanging files, and that tape is basically the result of our exchanges.
That's cool. So this is actually a very recent thing then, right? You'd say this collaboration happened in 2020?
Yeah, 100%. So like the timeline from the inception of the project to its release was no more than 5 or 6 months. Yeah, so that kind of the turnaround was pretty quick.
It's really interesting.
Caught me by surprise.
It's really interesting because from the outside, like, I don't know, like, you kind of just like see an artist, like what they put out on Bandcamp and like their social medias and stuff, but like I honestly thought that you were like homies with like leaving, Matthew David, like leaving records type stuff for a while, because like I had looked at one of your records, I think maybe from 2013 or something, where you were like, thank you, Matthew David, and a few other people. Like, without your work, I would not be, my work would not be the same. And so I was maybe like Matthew David offered, him some insight on music or something, and I was like, oh wow, the connection goes far back. But that's actually really interesting. So
So, let me be, you're not wrong, but it is, yeah. I shout people out, like, because I feel like I learn from so many artists, whether it's getting inspiration from them or something I pulled from their music or an interview they did or a conversation we may have had via email. So that, I think I just shouted them out because everything Leaving was doing was inspiring the scene globally.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Ambient and beats. But yeah, we had communicated before last year. It's just, it was never a conversation about releasing music, or my music at least. We chatted. I remember even like when he was working on his Out Mine, which was on Brain Feeder.
Oh,
we had
wow.
some conversations back then, and I was just super hyped for him because that was a big deal, even for him. Like, he's a huge luminary in the scene in LA, but to release something on Brain Feeder is a great accomplishment, especially the type of music he was putting out. But all of that to say, even if you want to get an idea of timeline, so yeah, it is crazy that I released so much music last year. I kind of was tracking it, and I still had stuff I didn't finish.
Oh.
But that's not normal, but I'll tell you why it happened. Well, first of all, I'll say for before 2020, a lot of the music I was putting out would be like piecing things together that I had already been working on for a while. And basically, by the end of 2019, I had gone through all of my archives and like didn't have any more music to pull from, any more old music. So I started really making stuff from scratch for the first time in a while. And I think the way my mind works, I have a lot of ideas. I just usually didn't have time to make them. And then there was this pandemic, and like also coinciding with that, I decided to set up a Bandcamp subscription. And so there's no two ways around it. Knowing I had a handful of dedicated fans who would be interested if I had something. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times I would stop myself from releasing something just because I felt like I like this, does anyone else like it? So essentially, like, knowing I had a like support and interest spurred me to create more than I've basically ever made in my life in that short a span of time.
That's cool. It's funny because I was actually literally just going to ask, is there any difference in your output pre-pandemic to now? But I guess you literally just answered that in that you had a subscription service and you had more time. So that's why there was so much output in 2020.
And I guess also, too, it was a matter of inspiration because certain parts of the process I started to like. I like all aspects of making an album, but the part I hate the most is actually making the music, oddly enough. So I usually think of song titles. I'm thinking about the artwork. I'm thinking about where I may want to release it. Am I just going to release it digitally, or do I feel like it deserves to be on a tape? And so I'm putting all those ideas in like the equivalent of a spreadsheet. And seeing how many projects. I like working on projects simultaneously too. So I guess before the pandemic, somewhere along those processes, I would either stall or talk myself out of continuing or morph it into something else. And again, this links back to what you were asking about Concentrics. Concentrics really was a kind of a turning point because I did 4 of those between September and December of 2019.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of told me I could work quickly. And I liked how it felt. And I was coming up with better and better stuff. And I just felt like, let me just keep improving. So
that's awesome. So I guess jumping to your most recent release, I think one of your most recent releases, but
It's
Sorry,
it's
I
the
really apologize. Like I make it difficult to talk about.
no,
something
it's okay. Yeah,
even
well,
this December.
I was
Too much
literally
has happened.
texting Maddie, dude. I'm having a hard time coming up with questions because there are so many Glia releases. I don't know what to talk about in specific.
Well, let me actually just say one thing on that. I really don't expect anyone to listen to all of it yet.
Yeah,
Because I feel like, you got to take time. And there's, again, a million other people releasing good music. So never feel guilty, not even just you, but like anybody who hears this, never feel guilty if you want to chat with me about something, but you're afraid, like, oh, I haven't heard his latest album yet. So, like, is he going to feel some kind of way? I don't care. I really don't.
yeah.
Okay.
That's funny. I love that. But I guess the most recent record that I purchased from your release with Dasa, what
Nice.
can you tell me about Totokia? Or I don't know how to pronounce it,
So
Totokia.
I don't either. This is one of the few times I hate this for this to come across as almost appropriation, but that actually, not all of my music necessarily has an interesting story. That has a pretty funny story. So like a lot of people, I got caught up in the whole Mandalorian series.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's what I'm going to say about that. Basically, at some point in my nerdiness, I was looking at the gaffy sticks that the Tusken Raiders use.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how this happened, but somehow I found out that they weren't just a random design. Like the production design for that weapon, that fictional weapon, was taken from Fijian culture.
Oh, really?
And so these tools, these other like warhammers, called Totokia, that's literally like if you Google that, it looks like a gaffy stick. It looks like a short gaffy stick. And so then I just started thinking, so then the other thing I found out is even those weapons were taken from another design, which is a fruit called pandanus.
Wow, a
Really?
fruit.
Yeah. So it looks kind of like a pineapple.
Yeah.
Kind of, but it's totally different. So the more I thought about the connection between those three things, and I just like started formulating these compositions in three phases. And what it made me think about is, first of all, these people took a totally harmless thing from nature and turned it into a weapon.
Yeah.
And then, secondly, that one of the most famous and highest grossing film series in the world has stolen culture from a small, poor island country, and they're probably not seeing any of the profits from that. And like how
I know, yeah.
an idea keeps getting corrupted in stages. So the whole album is kind of just like exploring, first of all, the first half, how an idea could become corrupted, and then the B side of the tape, or the whole gaffy stick side, is kind of like, we know so little about this fictional culture, the Tusken Raiders, and yet like they're in every Star Wars film. So I kind of was like thinking about that and how useless sci-fi is, and how maybe their music is interesting if they look interesting and they have interesting weapons.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was based on a lot of weird stuff.
That reminds me, there's the Ursula K. Gwynn science fiction novel that comes with a cassette of the music of this, like fictional planet that she had, created.
Wasn't that reissued?
It was on Revenge International.
I was like, when I first saw that, oh man, that's like a head trip, but it's amazing. It's real, and I kind of love explorations like that too. So, speaking of Ursula Le Guin, Earthsea had like a huge impact on me as a kid too. Like, there's a lot of stories. I was just talking to someone about the Phantom Soul Booth, Earthsea. There's a bunch of books that kind of just expand your thinking and imagination, that still kind of have a weird impact on my music.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
Thank you for asking about that album, because I don't think a lot of people have picked up on that. Someone else emailed me and was like, is this about what I think it is? And I was like, yes, it is.
That's honestly cool. They picked up on it. That's awesome. Like,
It's crazy.
yeah, props to them for realizing that was a weapon from, where'd you say again?
Fiji.
Yeah,
Actually,
Fiji. That's insane.
Crazy.
Yeah, I think I bought it specifically because I was like, this is all the way from Greece, dude. This is insane. You know,
that link up was just through Finery, actually, because
really?
put out a tape with them last summer, I want to say. Either he put out a tape or was part of a compilation. And yeah, so he reached out to me when he was starting this new label. I had this weird opportunity to be the first tape on a few labels, which... Why me?
That's kind of cool. Yeah, that's kind of sick.
Privilege.
Like, yeah, I was gonna say, how do you feel about that? How does it feel to be the first release on a couple labels that someone's like, someone has a vision for what they want in their head, and that's you.
That it is kind of weird, and in a way, you embrace it, the trust that's given you, and then it also kind of frees me up because I feel like I've made different music than I would have each of those times, just because I knew 100% like these people are into what I'm doing. So.
That's awesome. So I think we're coming towards the end. Maddie, did you have anything in specific that you want to ask?
Thomas, I think I always have something in specific I want to ask.
Nice.
But as you know, a rat is going to jump in your mouth.
Oh wait, hold on. Wait, before we do that, we have the fan questions.
Oh my!
Let's do the rat question.
Okay, let's do it now. Let's go for it.
Okay, so rat is going to jump in your mouth. There's no way to dodge it. And, the rat can do whatever you want here. Head or butt? Which way is it going in?
I almost wish I hadn't seen... I watched Matthew Sage's and Bryn's, and I've seen a few other episodes. So I knew this was coming, and it's still no easier to choose. I'm going to say butt first, because... I feel like, I don't know, starting with the tail, maybe ease your way into it.
Yeah.
Easier. Is there a right way to eat a rat?
I mean,
this is amazing.
Yeah, I feel like there'd be less of a struggle with the tail. You feel me?
Yeah, and that's why maybe I'm switching up. Maybe start with the head, so it'd be over more quickly.
Oh yeah, so
I'm imagining like the rat is suffering, and I really wouldn't want to go through that.
You're just gonna clamp down on that bad boy.
If a rat were to jump into my mouth and it was going face first, I don't know if I'd get so like anxious or adrenaline kicking, and my teeth would just turn razor sharp and just head hitting off.
Oh, see, that's a mental image that will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Oh, jeez. Immense.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God. That's so funny.
An amazing question.
It's so good, right? That's why we keep it here. And I have to give Maddie props because I think Maddie is the first one to
came up with that one.
Yeah.
I took that from some comedians on the What a Time podcast. So let's give a shout out to Patrick Monahan and Eli Unin, a few of those other New York types, but that they would ask that to any like comedian that came on, and I thought this is great.
Shout out.
I gave it to you when you started doing interviews, Thomas.
Yeah, that was dope. I think the first person we asked was Glass Beach, right? I think that might have been
Glass Beach. It goes back even further because you had Rat Fancy. And
true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Then it actually made sense.
Yeah,
a little on the nose.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Are you down to take a couple questions from the fans?
Sure. You said there were some questions from fans. I would love to hear those.
Okay, let's do it.
Or from you all, anyway.
So, this is from Emmanuel. I'm probably gonna say this wrong, so sorry, Emmanuel.
That's fine.
Buholzer. They're asking. He has a few songs with the name Stancerhorn in it. Has he ever been to the mountain?
Yeah, actually, good pickup on that. So I pretty much, my song titles are places I've been or would like to go, words I'm learning in other languages, foods, and that Mount Stancerhorn, for people who don't know, is a mountain in Switzerland. Got a chance to visit with my brothers and my family, and time flies by now, like almost 12, 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It's like a beautiful mountain. You could take a funicular up the side of it, and like,
oh, that's sick.
There's restaurants and stuff up there. there, but it's a place that I had really positive memories, and I kind of wanted to represent that in a song.
That's cool. So we have another one from Romanenko 1991. They're saying, what about MIDI Sprout with a little sprout emoji?
I've been kind of interested in that because I got to shout out two artists, King Britt out of Philly, and Imka is a local Virginia artist, I think. He's currently using it and has like even a pack, plant pack, sample pack, bass sample pack on Splice. But King Britt was the first artist I ever heard using it or interested in it. I kind of would love to. I just haven't actually tried it yet. It's a cool idea to take like the biometric from a plant and then like synthesize it.
That's sick. So, okay, this one, I guess, this one's from Matthew Sage in specific.
Okay. He's like, when is the album going to be done?
You know what? It's really funny because he asked, you still cranking on that Cashed album or what?
I knew it. I was just messing around, but he really asked that? Yes. Yeah. I was actually hoping there's a couple albums, and I will shout them out. Cash Media, Good Question, Minaret. So the jazz label you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, Minaret.
Going to follow up on that label. And those are three that probably, by my 2020 standards, should have been done in December. But my son was born in September, so things have slowed down a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm super excited. It's a duo album on Cash. So maybe also if it was a solo album, and this is no criticism because I love the idea, I probably would have just like done whatever came to my head. But I'm trying to think differently while working with another artist, and I hope the results are something that excite everyone. It's going to be fun.
That's awesome. Can you say who's the duo with, or is that a secret?
Yes. No, it's not a secret. Hopefully he doesn't mind. Andrew Scheich.
Oh, tight.
But yeah, Chicago is the one who's working with me on this. So
hell yeah.
He actually is dropping a tape with Leaving as well. So like,
wow.
There's this intertwining of Matthew's like Cash Media people. Like if you heard the band Music for Dogs.
Yeah.
Those guys. And like we're all connected in different ways. Same thing.
Is Andrew Scheich? Wait, were you saying Andrew Scheich was in Music for Dogs, or no? You're just
he's like. I think they were all friends. Like I first heard about them from them, I believe, performing at Open Space at one point. And then their first album was initially released on Minaret.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So linked with So it's just like weird coincidences.
It seriously is. Yeah, it seriously is. Actually, Bryn was the one who told us about your music when we interviewed Bryn. So
yeah, he's like Bryn is one of the people that changed my 2020 for sure. Like just listening to his music more, conversations with him, and then like the exposure that he's given me to in some situations is super awesome. I love that dude. And I'm gonna say there might be something by the end of 2021 that involves both of us, but I'm not gonna talk about that.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, for now, we're looking forward to your new record on Cashed with Andrew Scheich, and then also shout out Bryn's record with Jimmy Tamborello and Maurice. That's going to be insane. I just realized Jimmy Tamborello is going to be on the show next month, and it's funny because me and Maddie are going to be we've interviewed the whole trio at that point. So once we interview Jimmy Tamborello,
it was really exciting to tell my mom, "Hey, we're interviewing Jimmy from the Postal Service."
Exactly. That's like the only person we're into that our families might know.
I know. It's so wild.
I have to actually shout out Jimmy too because I just did a guest mix on his show Dying Song.
I think I saw that, yeah.
And I have to say 100% Jimmy is one of the people like Dan that like if it wasn't for them I might not still be making music and they might not realize the impact that they had, but Jimmy is the first person that's like that I maybe kind of admired that really backed my music like when I was nowhere. Like he's been playing some of my music on this show since probably like 2011 or 2012.
Oh, that's insane. Wow. I didn't realize Jimmy Tamborello has had a show on Dublab for that long.
Yeah, and like he really plays independent music. Like he plays music and he looks for music all around the world, which I super respect. So yeah, he in the past couple of years he's been a huge support and like just always inspired, mutual inspiration for the stuff that we do, and was super hyped to get to do a guest mix for his show.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jimmy is sick, and it's really interesting. He's doing a guest mix on my show, so it's interesting because it's the other way around, dude. Because it's like he usually has all these sick artists doing guest mix on his show, and now it's like, all right, Jimmy, your turn, right? You know.
Well, you know, we kind of take it for granted, but I feel like Matthew was talking about that last year. Like there was a stretch where like people don't really reach out to him because they feel like he has his own label, but he would love to do stuff. Like work on projects, work on albums, do releases even elsewhere sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, he can handle it. That's kind of how people probably think of Jimmy too.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably a thing. You know, I feel like you probably get pigeonholed in that way where it's like, this person's already always doing like, you know, their own interviews or their own thing. Like, why should I hit? They probably don't want to do something for themselves, you know?
Yeah. Interesting.
So anyways, Jimmy Tamborello, that's a little sneak peek into what's to come for TBD.
That's awesome.
Yeah, going to be announcing April's full schedule very soon. So I think that just about does it. Did you have any remarks you want to put in the airwaves and archives? Like, where can people keep up with your projects?
Yeah, I would say fizu.bandcamp.com. That's IFIZU or ZU for our international viewers. That's where you could find almost all of my music, and yeah, that's pretty much it. If you can reach out or like message me through Bandcamp, that's probably easiest, or if you know where to find me on Twitter, then I'd always welcome that. My email is probably floating somewhere, so
yeah.
There's too many people to thank or to shout out. Matthew David for one, Bryn, Colin, Dan Dirks, Andrew, and I will definitely forget some people that I haven't mentioned, but I have to say Fumitake Tamura from Japan.
Oh, tight.
And Chad Valencia, another great artist.
Shout out.
Those are some people that I kind of bounce ideas off and work with, and we haven't actually shared any official releases, so we'll see if anything comes to fruition with them.
That's awesome.
Just want to let them know. I appreciate everybody's support. Anyone who's ever listened to my music, whether you bought it or not, it really definitely means a lot.
And use those sample packs. If you're listening to this, use those sample packs in your own music. We got Maddie's gonna hop on that. So
I will though. I'm gonna get some Half-Life 2 sounds as well. Let's go.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Mix it in. You got to get the Dreamcast version for sure.
Oh, that's right. The Dreamcast version of Half-Life. Yeah. Let me go get a DVD porter here. Let's get on it.
I almost want to get a Dreamcast again. This is a tangent. I almost want to get a Dreamcast again. I still have a GameCube, but somehow I lost my Dreamcast. So
I found a modded original Xbox for $50 about 4 years ago, and
they're so cheap now.
Stuff like that, and I still see at Swap Meets Dreamcast for about $60 to $75.
Do you really?
The games are hard to find, but the console isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, thank you again also for having me on. It was really cool. Great questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Looking forward to performing.
Yeah. And that's all we have for today. So thanks for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. and NetNet Radio every Saturday, 8 p.m. This is Jonathan with his project Glia. Thanks for being on the show, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.